everyone, it's Shannon here for Hero Arts. In today's video, we are going to create these two splashy watercolored floral cards featuring a really awesome faux watercoloring technique that uses the included stencils in the April My Monthly Hero kit. I'm going to start with the cling stamp that's included in the kit, and because this is a cling stamp, I'm going to remove my mouse pad from my Misty, and then I'll place it somewhat centered in my Misty. Now I'm going to stamp this on a big piece of Bristol paper. I want to get that whole 6x6 background, and this Bristol paper is actually vellum, but you can use smooth or vellum for today's technique. You can even use watercolor paper as well. I first applied some anti-static powder and then inked up the stamp in embossing and watermark ink and stamped it a couple times to make sure I had plenty of that embossing ink onto my Bristol paper. Now I'll remove my panel from my Misty and then I'll pour on some detailed black embossing powder. Pour this all over this background, and then of course we will heat set this with the heat tool. This heat embossing will work as resist and will protect the image when we add the water. It'll also create little wells where some of the color will kind of pool up, and it just will allow for some really beautiful watercolor looks. Okay, I'm just finishing on pouring over that last bit of embossing powder. Now I'm going to heat set real quick with my heat tool. And then after we heat set this, we are going to move on to the stencils. So there are 3 layering stencils in this set, one for the leaves, one for the detail on the flowers, and one for the flowers, just kind of the base of the flowers. I'm not going to use the detail for the flowers. I'm not going to use that stencil. I'm just going to use this flower stencil here and the leaf stencil. Starting with this flower stencil, I'm going to ink blend the larger flowers partially with Taffy Reactive ink. Reactive ink is a hybrid ink. It's a mix of dye and pigment, and it just moves beautifully when you spritz it with water, when you add water. So I love this ink. I use it a ton. Now I'm going to blend the rest of these larger flowers with a little bit of Berry Smoothie. Just kind of changing up the colors a little bit so it'll make it a little bit more interesting. If not, so they're just that taffy. Now I'm adding a little bit more taffy just to make that pink a little brighter, a little bit more vivid. And now we're going to finish up with the smaller flowers. We're going to ink those with Purple Galaxy. This is such a gorgeous purple. It's so dark and rich. I love it. And it will mix beautifully with these pinks, which is something you really want to think about when you're going to add water and the colors are going to move and play. You want to be really mindful of your colors that you choose. So now we're going to move on to the next stencil, the final stencil for what I'm doing today, and this is the leaves. I'm going to ink blend these leaves first a little bit with Key Lime Fizz. Now this is the only color that's a little bit dangerous because it's a little bit on the yellow side and it can mix not so pretty with the purple. You want to think about your color wheel and the colors that are next to each other on the color wheel. That's the ones you want to stick to be really safe. But I wanted to add a little bit of interest and I chose that Key Lime Fizz. Now I'm finishing up with Blue Raspberry, and then when I'm finished with this Blue Raspberry, I'll then remove the tape and remove the stencil, and we're actually done with our ink blending for this card. Now it already looks really pretty, but we're going to try something fun and different. I'm taping down the sides here just to prevent this panel from warping too much, and so I have more control over how the colors mix. I have my spray bottle here with water, and I'm going to start spritzing this panel with water. You can already see the ink starting to get activated and already moving and flowing. This is going to fill in all that background area, but because we kept our colors thanks to the stencils over the flowers, most of the flowers are going to stay pink, most of the leaves are going to stay green. It's just going to fill in kind of the background areas, which is really nice. And my Rocket Air Blaster here, this is a tool used to actually clean camera lenses, but a lot of people use it for alcohol inks. I'm using it here to blast, kind of blow air over these inks and move them around a little bit more so I get some more play with the colors and even kind of breach some of the wells to color in some of the bees a little bit as well. So here's the panel completely dry, and now I'm going to kind of take this up a notch. First I'm going to start with this yellow marker. This is a a water-based ink marker from Tumble Dual Brush pens, and I'm just going to color in the bees really quick with yellow, and just to kind of make them pop a little bit more. They did have a little bit of color because of the mixing and playing, but I just wanted to kind of bring in a little bit more yellow. Now I have a gray marker. This is where we're really going to take this panel up a notch, and I'm starting to add a shadow here, kind of a drop shadow, so it's kind of to the right and down, but I'm not keeping that a hard, fast rules. I think a lot of people are really scared about adding shadows because they're worried about kind of doing it at the wrong angle. I really think you should just go for it. Don't be so stressed about it. No one's going to really be able to notice if it's all off, especially something that's so busy like this where there's a lot of images. It's really hard to tell if maybe you drew the shadow in wrong. And I'm just going around the flowers, the leaves, everything. This did take some time. If this is too much, you can definitely, narrow down the stamped background and not do this on the whole thing. You only need a section of this to make a card. After I finished going around with that gray marker and adding the shadow to all my flowers, I'm now going to add a highlight with a white gel pen. And I'm basically going to add this to every petal, every leaf, just a little highlight. Definitely something you don't have to do, but it will really make these flowers look kind of glossy and shiny and even add more depth and dimension to this panel. And I think once it's all done, you'll be blown away by how much depth we got here. And it's just really beautiful to look at. So I went ahead and trimmed this down to 6 by 6, and now I'm just going to cut it diagonally right in half, and I'm going to use these 2 halves for backgrounds on 2 cards. So as you can see, I have my 2 halves and 2 A2 top folding Dove White card bases. First, I'm just going to add some liquid adhesive, some precision glue to the backside of my half and just stick it down. I'll use my plate from my die cutting machine, kind of hold it in place while the glue sets up, and then I'll work on my second card. Same process, just add the glue to the backside of the panel and then stick it down on my card front. Once this glue is kind of set up, that's when I can trim off that overhang. So that bottom one is ready to go. So I'm going to grab it, flip it over, and grab some long bladed scissors. This is great for trimming off that overhang. Flip it over and just trim off that. And then I'll repeat that for my second one. Just kind of flip it over, run the blade up against the card base, and then trim off that excess. And that's how you can ensure you get a nice, perfect parallel cut. Now we're going to move on to our sentiment. I have this word die from the kit. I die cut 4 Amazings out of pitch black cardstock, and then I cut a matte layer with the second die out of Vellum. Now I'm just going to adhere 3 of these black Amazings together. And after I stick these 3 together, I'm then going to move on to my final Amazing, my final black Amazing, add adhesive to the back side of this, and then I'm going to grab a piece of scrap paper and just kind of press it down to remove any excess adhesive and then stick it down onto my Vellum mat. That will just ensure that no glue kind of squirts out and gets all over that vellum, which can be very visible. Now I'm going to add adhesive to my stacked 3 black cardstocks, press off the excess adhesive, and then stick down that vellum and black Amazing on top, and that will be my word die cut for my card front. Now I'm going to move on to my sub sentiment. I have this awesome stamp set from the kit as well. I've just inked it up in embossing Watermark ink, then dipped it into some detail white embossing powder, and then heat set. I then trimmed this or fussy cut this off camera, added some foam adhesive to the back, and I also made a second Amazing and a second sub sentiment for my second card. Same process, just used a different sub sentiment for that second one. Now I'm going to add some adhesive to my Amazing word die cut, stick that right on the diagonal, and then remove the backing on the adhesive and place it right below the sentiment. This one says amazing in every way. And then my second card, same process. I'm going to first adhere the word die cut to the card front and then finish by removing the backing on my sub sentiment. And this one says you are amazing. So just some really fun cards. These would be great for Mother's Day. They'd also be great just to send to your friend or even for teachers as well. So I'm going to hold these up to the camera so you can get a good look at all the details on this card. Hopefully really really notice the additional depth that we added with that shadow. You can see how the flowers kind of pop away from the watercolor background, and then that little shine, just that little highlight, makes them look so shiny and pretty. I just think this is such a fun background and such a different look that you can achieve even with layering stencils and a cling stamp. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card and video. If you have any questions about the products I used, please check out the links below in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.